There has never been a global event as dramatic as World War II. All Quiet on the Western Front, The Zone of Interest, Oppenheimer, and Colette. These are just Oscar-winning movies released this decade. We could spend all day listing movies that explore events relating to World War II, and we will still be missing a lot. I've always been amazed at the abundance of these movies and how rich they are. And that led me to ask this question. How is it possible that we've had and we keep having good, detailed, and even accurate movies about an event that happened in an era where less than half of American households owned a telephone? There are multiple answers to that question, but none is as interesting as what you're about to watch. In 2008, the National Archives published a 750,000 page document that included revelations that some US celebrities spied for America during World War II. A significant number of these celebrities were Hollywood figures, such as John Ford, Julia Child, and Sterling Hayden. Celebrities as spies might seem like a far-fetched concept in 2025, but not in the early 20th century. This was a time when different facets were sort of in their apex. Democracy was starting to morph into this roadmap to success.
First is freedom of speech and expression everywhere in the world. The second is freedom of every person to worship God in his own way everywhere in the world.
Authoritarianism felt challenged, and communism touched that potential. While these were happening, other things were happening too. Cinema was entering its golden years, and separately, propaganda had become a transformative political weapon. These elements would define the first half of the 20th century, influence events during World War II, and create catalysts for the world after. Propaganda was a central factor in World War One. Countries used it as a tool to raise troops, boost citizens' morale, appeal to other nations to join their cause, and diminish the morale of rival citizens and soldiers. Although words and drawings were the common form of propaganda during this era, movies were becoming a major tool. For instance, To Hell with Caesar and The Caesar, the Beast of Berlin were two propaganda movies about Wilhelm II, the German emperor during World War One. The Caesar, the Beast of Berlin was an exaggerated depiction of the greed and humanity that clouded Caesar Wilhelm II's reign. By the end of World War One, propaganda had become a well-known tool, and leaders were aware of its potential and how to effectively weaponize it. Hitler, for example, believed the spread of propaganda was the primary cause of Germany's collapse during World War One. Beyond that, he believed propaganda was a limitless weapon that could be used to achieve anything. And this wasn't just a view held by Hitler. During the war, President Woodrow Wilson created the Committee on Public Information, an independent agency that was essentially an effective propaganda generating machine. It was so effective that these political scientists believed the agency's effectiveness was one of the reasons why propaganda became a negatively passive term. Going into World War II, the use of propaganda had been mastered, and the already powerful tool had become a purposeful tool. For instance, the Nazi Party had weaponized it to rise from an insignificant party in German politics to the home of leadership. Joseph Stalin had weaponized it to shield his atrocities from public awareness, creating an alternate reality where Soviet citizens either remained ignorant of his crimes or perceived them as necessary actions. So at the time of the war had developed a strong sense of moral clarity. Germans had taken on the Nazis' anti-Jewish and anti-Bolshevik prejudice. Soviets were ready to go all out despite tragic economic realities, and the British sense of national unity was as sturdy as ever. But what about the Americans? By the time the war started in 1939, many Americans still thought participating in World War One was a big mistake. Even though they hoped the Nazis would be defeated, they didn't want any part of the war. But between the time the war started and when America joined, public opinion changed gradually. By November 1941, 1 month before Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, 60% of Americans believed giving aid to Britain was more important than staying out of the war. While there were many factors that contributed to the gradual change of opinion, propaganda was one of the key factors. And the most effective way of disseminating propaganda was. Look at this. Does the name sound familiar? Yeah, right. Hitler, Beast of Berlin, is one of the most important pieces of propaganda ever made. Not because it was pretty good, it wasn't even for its time, but it was a movie that shouldn't have been made because at the time, movies about the war were discouraged by the US government due to its neutrality stance. In fact, the New York Censor Board demanded the film be retitled as The Beast of Berlin, eliminating the Hitler reference. The film eventually got retitled to Good Step, the same title as the novel it adapted. So it was a movie that was literally ahead of its time. And in 1942, about 3 years after it was released, and about a year after the US joined the war, it got re-released as Hitler, the Beast of Berlin, the original title. But this time, the government wanted it. The same movie that got censored when it came out was then heavily advertised and pushed by the US government.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
Why movies like Hitler, the Beast of Berlin were such a piece of propaganda? They were too obvious. Hitler, the Beast of Berlin depicted the brutal treatment of heroes resisting the Nazi reign. Movies like that were needed, but they also needed movies with a clear plot, a lot of subtle meanings, and lasting indignations that pushes you to do something. Like Casablanca, one of my favorite movies ever.
Oh, Monsieur Rick, Monsieur Rick. Some Germans, boom, 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 gave his check. Is that right?
Where were you last night?
That's so long ago, I don't remember.
Will I see you tonight?
I never make plans that far ahead.
Give me another.
Sasha, she's had enough.
Don't listen to him, Sasha. I'll fill it up.
Yvonne, I love you, but he pays me.
Casablanca is an excellent World War II propaganda movie because the propaganda seemed like a byproduct rather than the central focus of the movie. In real time, it felt like we were watching a movie, a well-made one. But then you get home, and the percolation effect hits. You start digging into the subtle meaning of how weak is an allegorical representation of America in the war, and how the symbolism of the end is effectively about making sacrifices for the greater good, a message that needed to resonate with Americans at the time. The precise mechanism behind these effective propaganda films wasn't accidental. During the war, the government took control of Hollywood, in the sense that they got to regulate the content of R-rated movies before they were released. For instance, Gunga Din was stopped from getting released because it glorified British imperialism, and that wasn't the message they intended to pass at the time. On the other hand, the creators of dive bombers were given 1 week access to a naval ship, even though it affected the training schedule of the Navy team. This tit for tat was common throughout the war. Hollywood filmmakers would get access to military equipment and unclassified military information needed to shoot a movie, while the government would get to regulate the content of the movie. The Battle of Midway, directed by John Ford, who was literally an intelligence officer of the US government during the war, included footage of the actual battle on Midway Island. John Ford would later direct another propaganda documentary for the US Navy 1 year after the Battle of Midway. This exchange didn't end with World War II, especially for Hollywood. Relationships built and loyalty shown during the war allowed producers and directors to gain access to information and even resources for films shot after the war. For instance, in this movie, The Longest Day, the producers were able to consult with World War II soldiers who participated in D-Day. Impressively, they were also able to use hundreds of American and British soldiers as extras in the film. The Longest Day was released in 1962, almost 20 years after the end of the war. Another notable movie that benefited from this is Saving Private Ryan. Speaking with military veterans caused Steven Spielberg to rewrite the movie script. And 12 O'Clock High, another movie, made use of actual footage to depict accuracy. So the remarkable accuracy and continued abundance of World War II movies is, at its core, a story of how propaganda bettered access. It is a historical bargain where Hollywood's willingness to serve as a wartime messaging vehicle earned generations of filmmakers unprecedented access to military resources and high-end information that continues to enrich cinema. So next time you're called up, savoring popcorn, reaching a cold drink, and watching your favorite World War II movie, remember that.